My name is Isabella Martinez, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew exactly who my family was. That Thanksgiving dinner when my parents physically attacked me in front of 20 relatives for refusing to pay my sister's rent changed everything forever. What started as humiliation became the catalyst that exposed decades of lies, financial fraud, and a family conspiracy so twisted it would destroy everything I believed about blood loyalty. The beating was just the beginning. The real shock came when I discovered why they needed that money so desperately. But before we dive into how my entire world crumbled and rebuilt itself into something stronger, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, because this story spans from coast to coast, and I love seeing how far these family drama stories reach. Hit that like button if you have ever felt like the family scapegoat, and make sure to subscribe because this revenge story has twists that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about family loyalty. Trust me, you will want to see how justice finally caught up with them. The morning of Thanksgiving started like any other holiday at the Martinez family compound in suburban Phoenix. My parents had been hosting these elaborate gatherings for 15 years, ever since Dad's construction business took off, and they bought the massive house with the perfect entertaining space. I arrived early to help with preparations, carrying homemade cranberry sauce and my grandmother's famous stuffing recipe that Mom always claimed as her own. My sister Sophia was already there, lounging on the leather couch with her feet up, scrolling through her phone while Mom bustled around the kitchen. At 25, Sophia had perfected the art of looking busy while doing absolutely nothing. Her apartment in downtown Scottsdale cost more than most people's mortgages, but somehow she never seemed to have rent money when the first of the month rolled around. "Isabella, thank God you are here," Mom said, not looking up from the turkey. "Sophia needs help with rent this month. Just $1,500. You know how tight things have been for her since she quit that marketing job." I paused, setting down the cranberry sauce harder than necessary. "Mom, this is the fourth time this year. I already gave her money for rent in August, October, and that emergency car repair in September that turned out to be a weekend in Las Vegas." Sophia looked up from her phone with those wide, innocent eyes that had gotten her out of trouble since childhood. "Bella, it is just temporary. The freelance photography business is about to take off. I have 3 weddings booked for December." "You said that 6 months ago," I replied, trying to keep my voice level as relatives began filtering into the house. "I am not your personal ATM, Sophia. I work 60 hours a week at the hospital to afford my own place." The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Mom's jaw tightened in that familiar way that meant I had crossed an invisible line. Dad emerged from his study, where he had been watching football, and I could see the storm brewing in his expression. "Isabella Maria Martinez." Dad's voice carried that authoritative tone that used to make me shrink as a child. "Your sister is family. We help family. End of discussion." "No, it is not the end of discussion," I said, my voice rising as aunts, uncles, and cousins pretended not to notice the tension while filling their plates with appetizers. "I have given Sophia over $8,000 this year alone. She has never paid back a single penny, and frankly, I am tired of enabling this behavior." That was when everything exploded. Mom dropped the carving knife with a clatter that made everyone in the open concept living area turn and stare. "How dare you embarrass this family in front of everyone," she hissed, her face flushing red. "After everything we have done for you, everything we have sacrificed, and this is how you repay us." "What sacrifices?" I shot back, my nursing training kicking in as I tried to remain calm and logical. "You mean paying for my college tuition that I worked 3 jobs to afford? Or maybe you mean the emotional support you provided when I was working double shifts to put myself through nursing school while Sophia was partying her way through community college on your dime." Dad stepped forward, his face contorted with rage I had never seen before. "You ungrateful little bitch," he snarled, and before I could react, his hand connected with my face in a slap that echoed through the suddenly silent house. The shock of it froze me for a moment. In 28 years, my parents had never laid a hand on me, grounded me, yelled at me, given me the silent treatment for weeks, but never physical violence. "Roberto," My Aunt Carmen gasped from across the room, but Dad was not finished. You live in that fancy condo, driving that nice car, making good money, and you cannot help your own sister. Mom joined in, grabbing my arm and shaking me hard enough that I stumbled. What kind of selfish person did we raise? The kind who pays her own bills. I shouted back, jerking away from her grip, but Dad grabbed my shoulders and shoved me against the kitchen island. The granite edge caught my hip, sending shooting pain down my leg. Sophia sat frozen on the couch, her phone recording everything, though I would not discover that until much later. 20 relatives watched in stunned silence as my parents continued their verbal and physical assault, calling me selfish, ungrateful, and demanding that I write Sophia a check immediately. Give her the money, Isabella, Dad demanded, his hand raised again. Write the check now or get out of this house and do not come back. My head was spinning from the slap, my hip throbbing from the granite edge, and my heart breaking from the realization that my parents would physically attack me over money for Sophia. But it was what happened next that changed everything. Through the chaos and shouting, I heard my 8-year-old cousin Miguel whisper to his mother, loud enough for me to catch, "Why are they so mean to Aunt Isabella? She is not even their real daughter anyway." The room went dead silent. My Aunt Carmen went white as a sheet and quickly hushed Miguel, but the damage was done. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode, and suddenly every awkward moment, every instance of preferential treatment for Sophia, every time I felt like an outsider in my own family, crystallized into a moment of terrible clarity. "What did he say?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Nothing," Mom said quickly, but her face had gone pale. "Miguel is confused. He does not know what he is talking about." But I was already looking around the room at the faces of my relatives, seeing guilt and discomfort where there should have been confusion. Uncle David would not meet my eyes. Aunt Carmen was actively shushing Miguel while shooting panicked looks at my parents. What did he mean, I am not their real daughter? I demanded, my voice growing stronger despite the chaos of emotions swirling inside me. Dad stepped forward again, his hand raised, but this time I was ready. I stepped back, my nursing training kicking in as I assessed the situation with cold, clinical clarity. That was when I knew I needed to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Because if Miguel was right, it explained everything. And if he was wrong, my parents had just destroyed our relationship forever over Sophia's rent money. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. I left that house with my face burning, my hip aching, and my mind reeling from Miguel's innocent revelation. The drive home to my downtown Phoenix condo was a blur of traffic lights and racing thoughts. Every family memory I had ever cherished was now tainted with suspicion and doubt. Once inside my apartment, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat down at my computer. If Miguel was telling the truth, there had to be evidence somewhere. I started with the basics, searching through every document I could find in my apartment. Birth certificate, social security card, medical records from childhood. My birth certificate listed Roberto and Carmen Martinez as my parents, born at Phoenix General Hospital on March 15, 1995. Everything looked legitimate, but something nagged at me. The paper quality seemed different from Sophia's birth certificate, which I had seen when she needed it for her passport application 2 years ago. I pulled up my laptop and began what would become a 3-week obsession with uncovering the truth. First, I contacted Phoenix General Hospital to request my complete medical records from birth. As a nurse, I knew the system and exactly what to ask for. The response came back within a week. No record of an Isabella Martinez being born on March 15, 1995. My hands shook as I read that email. Either there was a clerical error or my entire identity was built on lies. Next, I hired a private investigator named Marcus Chin, a former police detective who specialized in family cases. I met him at a small coffee shop in Old Town Scottsdale, choosing a location far from anywhere my family might recognize me. I need to know if I was adopted, I told him straight out, sliding copies of my documents across the table. My parents have never mentioned adoption, but something my cousin said at Thanksgiving made me question everything. Marcus was a tall, Serious man with kind eyes who listened to my story without judgment. This happens more often than you might think, he said, examining my birth certificate. Families sometimes keep adoption secrets for decades, thinking they are protecting everyone involved. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when money gets involved. Money? I asked, thinking of Sophia's endless financial needs. Adoption can be expensive, especially private adoptions. Sometimes families take on debt or make financial arrangements that continue for years. If your parents paid significant money for a private adoption, they might feel you owe them something in return. The pieces started clicking together in my mind. The constant pressure to support Sophia financially. The way my parents always made me feel guilty about my success. The subtle suggestions that I owed them for all their sacrifices. Marcus agreed to investigate for a reasonable fee, and I left that meeting feeling both terrified and relieved to finally be taking action. While he worked his sources, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I started with social media, something I should have thought of immediately. I created fake accounts and began searching for any trace of my birth parents. The name on my birth certificate was Isabella Martinez, but what if that was not my original name? 3 days into my social media deep dive, I found something that made my blood run cold. A Facebook post from 7 years ago in a closed group for parents seeking lost children. A woman named Jennifer Walsh had posted a heartbreaking plea, searching for her daughter Isabella, who was given up for adoption in March 1995 in Phoenix. The post included a baby photo that looked exactly like my own baby pictures. I screenshot everything and immediately called Marcus. I think I found my birth mother, I told him, my voice shaking. And I think my parents might have lied about more than just the adoption. When Marcus and I met the next day, he had news of his own. Your birth certificate is a high-quality forgery, he said, spreading documents across the table. I have contacts at the courthouse who confirmed that no Isabella Martinez was born on that date to Roberto and Carmen Martinez. However, there was a private adoption finalized around that time, handled by a lawyer who was later disbarred for falsifying documents. I stared at the documents, feeling my entire world shift beneath me. So Miguel was right. I am not their biological daughter. That is correct. But here is where it gets interesting, Marcus continued. I traced the financial records associated with that adoption. Your parents paid $40,000 for you through this disbarred lawyer. But they also received ongoing payments from the state for your care, claiming you were a special needs adoption case. Special needs? I laughed bitterly. I was a perfectly healthy baby and child. Exactly. They defrauded the state for years, collecting money meant for children with disabilities while you were growing up. That money helped fund Sophia's lifestyle, her private schools, her college expenses. You were essentially paying for her privileged upbringing through fraud committed in your name. The room spun around me. Not only was I adopted and lied to for 28 years, but my parents had used me to steal money from programs designed to help truly vulnerable children. They had built Sophia's entire life on money stolen in my name. There is more, Marcus said gently. I found Jennifer Walsh, your birth mother. She has been looking for you for years. She never wanted to give you up, but she was 16 and her parents forced the adoption. She has been saving money ever since, hoping to find you and make amends. I sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of their deception. My parents had not only stolen my identity and my relationship with my birth mother, but they had committed federal fraud and used that money to create the golden child lifestyle Sophia had always enjoyed. What kind of legal trouble are they looking at? I asked. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Federal adoption fraud, state benefit fraud, identity fraud, tax evasion on the unreported benefits. We are talking about decades of systematic fraud that could result in serious prison time and massive financial penalties. I thought about Sophia, lounging on that leather couch, demanding rent money while my parents beat me for refusing to enable her lifestyle. A lifestyle built on money stolen in my name from programs meant to help disabled children. I want to contact Jennifer, I said finally. And I want to know exactly how much money they stole over the years. I can arrange both, Marcus replied. But Isabella, you need to be prepared. Once we start pulling this thread, your entire family structure is going to collapse. Are you ready for that? I thought about the feel of Dad's hand across my face, the sound of Mom calling me ungrateful, the 20 relatives who watched them assault me without intervening. I thought about Sophia's smirk as she demanded money she had never earned. They destroyed our relationship the moment they decided to lie to me and steal in my name, I said. I am ready to burn it all down. The meeting with Jennifer Walsh took place on a cold December morning at a small park in Tempe, chosen specifically because it felt neutral and safe. I arrived 30 minutes early, my nerves making it impossible to sit still in the car. When I finally saw her walking toward the designated bench, I knew immediately that Miguel had been telling the truth. Jennifer looked exactly like an older version of me. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same stubborn jawline that I had always assumed came from Dad's side of the family. She carried herself with the careful dignity of someone who had been through trauma but refused to be broken by it. Isabella, she said softly, stopping about 10 feet away. You look exactly like I imagined you would. The next 2 hours were simultaneously the most painful and healing experience of my life. Jennifer told me about being a 16-year-old honor student whose pregnancy ended her college dreams. Her parents, wealthy but image-obsessed, had shipped her off to a home for unwed mothers and arranged the adoption without her input. I wanted to keep you so desperately, she said, tears streaming down her face. I had names picked out, a crib set up in my room, everything ready. But my parents said I would ruin my life and yours if I tried to raise you alone. She had spent the last 12 years as a social worker specializing in family reunification, driven by her own loss to help other families stay together. She had never married, never had other children, dedicating her life to the work that connected her to the daughter she had lost. I have been saving money since I got my first job, she said, pulling out a bank statement that showed over $200,000 in savings. Every penny was meant for you, for your education, for a house down payment, for whatever you needed when I found you. The contrast between Jennifer's genuine love and my adoptive parents' exploitation was staggering. While Jennifer had sacrificed everything to build a future for the daughter she hoped to find, Roberto and Carmen had stolen money in my name to fund Sophia's lifestyle. There is something you need to know, I said, and told her everything Marcus had discovered about the fraud, the fake documents, and the stolen benefits. Jennifer's social worker training kicked in immediately. This is worse than adoption fraud, she said, her voice turning cold and professional. They committed identity theft against a minor, defrauded multiple government agencies, and used you as a prop in an ongoing criminal enterprise. The statute of limitations has not run out on most of these crimes. She pulled out her phone and started making notes. I know people at the FBI who specialize in adoption fraud and benefit scams. I also know attorneys who work pro bono on cases like this. Isabella, if you are willing to pursue this, we can make sure they face consequences for what they have done. That evening, Jennifer introduced me to her network of allies. First was David Kim, an FBI agent who had been investigating adoption fraud rings for 5 years. He reviewed Marcus's evidence with the sharp focus of someone who had seen too many families destroyed by similar schemes. This is a textbook case, he said, spreading the documents across Jennifer's kitchen table. The falsified birth certificate, the fraudulent benefit claims, the ongoing financial exploitation. We can build a solid federal case with what you have already gathered. Next was Maria Santos, an attorney who specialized in adoption law and had worked with Jennifer on several family reunification cases. She was a fierce woman in her 50s who had built her career fighting for children who had been failed by the system. The civil side is even more promising than the criminal case, Maria explained. They defrauded government programs in your name, which means you can sue for damages. We are talking about recovery of all the stolen benefits plus punitive damages. But more importantly, we can void the fraudulent adoption and legally restore your relationship with Jennifer. As the weeks passed, our evidence file grew thicker. David's FBI investigation uncovered additional victims, 3 other families who had used the same disbarred lawyer and engaged in similar benefit fraud. Maria's legal team found precedent cases that supported massive damage awards for victims of identity fraud. But the most surprising ally came from within my own extended family. Aunt Carmen called me on a Tuesday evening in January, her voice shaking with emotion. "Isabella, I need to talk to you about what Miguel said at Thanksgiving. I have been carrying the secret for too long." We met at a quiet restaurant in Mesa, and Carmen spent the first 10 minutes apologizing for 28 years of complicity. "I was there when they brought you home," she said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. Roberto told the whole family that Carmen had complications during delivery and the birth records were temporarily mixed up. We all believed him because why would we question something like that? But Carmen had seen things over the years that never quite made sense. Roberto and Carmen's sudden financial improvements right after my adoption. The way they always seemed to have money for Sophia's expenses, but claimed poverty when it came to anything for me. The government checks that arrived monthly but were never explained. "I started putting pieces together about 5 years ago when Miguel was born," Carmen continued. "I had to deal with all the same agencies for his birth certificate and social security number, and some of the paperwork looked different from what I remembered seeing for you when you were little." She had been quietly investigating on her own, driven by guilt and growing suspicion. When Miguel made his innocent comment at Thanksgiving, she knew the truth was finally coming out. "I have copies of documents," she said, pulling a manila envelope from her purse. "Financial records that Roberto showed me years ago when he was bragging about his investment strategies. I think he was laundering the fraud money through fake business expenses and investments." The documents Carmen provided were the missing piece David had been looking for. Bank records showing regular government deposits that matched the timeline of benefit fraud. Investment accounts funded with money that Roberto had claimed came from construction bonuses, but actually originated from the fraudulent benefits. Most damaging of all was a recorded phone conversation Carmen had made 3 weeks earlier. "I called Roberto and told him I was having financial troubles," she explained. "I asked him for advice about applying for special benefits for Miguel, making up a story about developmental delays. He walked me through the entire fraud process, assuming I wanted to follow his example." The recording was crystal clear. Roberto explaining exactly how to falsify medical records, which doctors to avoid because they were too thorough, and how to maximize benefit payments through false claims about special needs. "He was so proud of himself," Carmen said, tears streaming down her face. "He told me they had made over $300,000 over the years from benefits they claimed for you. Money that could have helped families with children who actually needed those resources." That number hit me like a physical blow. $300,000 stolen in my name. Money that should have gone to families with genuinely disabled children, instead funding Sophia's private schools, her car, her college expenses, and her ongoing lifestyle. "There is one more thing," Carmen said hesitantly. "Sophia knows. She has always known. I heard her and Carmen talking about it years ago, laughing about how you worked so hard to pay for things that they had essentially stolen money to buy for her." The betrayal was complete. Not only had my parents built their lives on fraud committed in my name, but Sophia had grown up knowing she was living off stolen money while watching me struggle to afford my own education and expenses. But as painful as these revelations were, they also gave me something I had never expected, a clear path to justice. With allies like Jennifer, David, Maria, and even Carmen, I was no longer the isolated family scapegoat fighting alone. I was the center of a team dedicated to exposing decades of lies and ensuring that the people who had exploited and betrayed me would finally face consequences. The war was about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I was not fighting it alone. This is a really compelling start. The story has strong emotional hooks, clear escalation, and the Reddit-style drama you requested. Should I continue with parts 5 to 7 to complete the full story? The revenge elements and justice-served moments are building perfectly toward what should be a very satisfying conclusion. February 15th marked exactly 1 year since I had started questioning my family's financial demands. It also marked the day we executed what Maria called the perfect storm of justice. Every piece of evidence was in place, every ally was positioned, and every legal document was filed and ready. The plan was elegantly simple. David's FBI team would execute search warrants on my parents' home and businesses simultaneously, while Maria served civil lawsuit papers. Carmen would be there as a witness, and Jennifer would be with me at the FBI field office, watching justice unfold from a safe distance. But I wanted Roberto and Carmen to know this was coming from me. I called my mother that morning, using my sweetest voice. "Mom, I have been thinking about everything that happened at Thanksgiving. I want to make things right with the family. Can we meet for lunch today? Just you, Dad, Sophia, and me. I want to apologize and discuss helping Sophia with her finances again." The eagerness in Carmen's voice was almost pathetic. "Oh, Isabella, I am so glad you're finally seeing reason. Of course we can meet. Come to the house around noon. Sophia will be here, and we can all talk like a proper family." What they did not know was that Carmen's house was already under surveillance. David's team had been monitoring their communications for weeks, gathering additional evidence of ongoing fraud. My lunch invitation was actually the signal for the coordinated takedown to begin. I arrived at the house at exactly noon, wearing a wire and carrying a small recording device in my purse. David's team was positioned around the neighborhood, waiting for my signal to move in. Sophia answered the door with her usual entitled smirk. "Well, look who decided to crawl back and beg forgiveness," she said. "I hope you brought your checkbook because my rent is due tomorrow, plus I need money for a security deposit on a new car." "Actually, I brought something even better," I replied, stepping into the living room where my parents waited with expectant faces. The next 20 minutes were the most satisfying of my entire life. I told them everything. About hiring Marcus and discovering the adoption fraud. About finding Jennifer and learning the truth about my birth. About the FBI investigation and the evidence of benefit fraud stretching back decades. Roberto's face went through a fascinating progression of emotions. Confusion, denial, anger, and finally, cold calculation as he realized the magnitude of what was about to happen. "You ungrateful little bitch," he snarled, standing up aggressively. "After everything we did for you, everything we sacrificed, this is how you repay us? By destroying your own family." "My family?" I laughed, pulling out my phone to show him a photo of Jennifer and me together. "You mean the family that bought me through an illegal adoption, forged my birth certificate, and stole $300,000 in government benefits in my name? That family?" Carmen went white as a sheet. "You cannot prove any of this," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can prove all of it," I replied and began listing the evidence piece by piece. Bank records showing the government deposits. The falsified medical records claiming I had developmental disabilities. The recorded phone conversation with Roberto explaining the fraud process to Carmen. Sophia, who had been silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke up. "So, what if they got some extra money from the government? You turned out fine anyway. Why are you trying to destroy us over something that happened when you were a baby?" "Because that money was stolen from programs designed to help children who actually needed it," I said, my voice rising. "Because you have lived your entire privileged life on money that should have gone to families with genuinely disabled kids. Because you have all treated me like garbage while knowing that your lifestyle was built on fraud committed in my name." That was when Roberto made the mistake that sealed his fate. He lunged toward me, his face twisted with rage, his hand raised to strike me just like he had at Thanksgiving. "You are going to shut your mouth and walk away from this," he threatened. "Or I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." But this time, I was ready. I stepped back calmly and said the words that would change everything. "Actually, Roberto, you are under arrest." The front door burst open as David and his FBI team flooded into the house, weapons drawn and badges visible. The looks of shock and terror on my parents' faces were worth every moment of pain they had caused me over the years. "Roberto Martinez, Carmen Martinez, you are under arrest for federal adoption fraud, benefit fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government," David announced in his official voice. Sophia tried to run toward the back door but found it blocked by additional agents. As they read Roberto and Carmen their rights, I watched 28 years of lies and exploitation finally crumble into dust. Isabella, how could you do this to your own family? Carmen cried as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. You are not my family, I replied coldly. My family is the birth mother who spent 12 years saving money for the daughter she hoped to find again. My family is the FBI agent and attorney who helped me discover the truth. My family is the aunt who finally found the courage to tell the truth about your crimes. As they led Roberto and Carmen away in handcuffs, Sophia turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. You just destroyed everything, she spat. I hope you are proud of yourself. I am, I replied honestly. For the first time in my life, I am genuinely proud of myself for having the courage to stand up to bullies and criminals. David approached me as the last of his team finished processing the scene. The search warrants turned up even more evidence than we expected, he said quietly. Financial records going back to the beginning, correspondence with the disbarred lawyer, even records showing they claimed you had autism and cerebral palsy to maximize benefit payments. What happens now? I asked, watching the FBI vehicles pull away with my former parents inside. Now they face the consequences of 28 years of systematic fraud, David replied. Based on the evidence we have, they are looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison, plus restitution of all stolen benefits with interest and penalties. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. The house that had always felt like a prison of lies and manipulation now felt like just an empty building. The people who had controlled and exploited me for decades were finally facing justice. The war was over. The truth had won. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. The next 72 hours felt like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Everything my parents had built through fraud and deception systematically collapsed as the full scope of their crimes became public knowledge. Sophia called me 19 times that first night, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. The first few were angry threats about ruining the family and destroying innocent lives. But as reality set in, and she realized the magnitude of the legal trouble facing our parents, her tone shifted to panic and finally to pathetic begging. Isabella, please, her final voicemail said, her voice breaking with sobs. You have to help me understand what happens now. They froze all the bank accounts. I cannot pay rent, I cannot buy groceries, I do not even have gas money. Please call me back. I am sorry for everything. I am so sorry. I listened to each voicemail once and then deleted them all. After 28 years of being treated like the family ATM, Sophia could figure out how to support herself like the rest of the adult world. The media attention started on day 2. Local news stations picked up the story because adoption fraud involving disabled children benefits always generates public outrage. The headlines were devastating for my parents. Local couple arrested for decades-long adoption fraud. Fake disabled child used to steal benefits. FBI uncovers adoption scam worth hundreds of thousands. But it was the comment sections that really drove home how much damage Roberto and Carmen had done. Parent after parent shared stories about struggling to get legitimate benefits for genuinely disabled children, while people like my parents stole money from those same programs. Jennifer and I watched the news coverage together from her apartment, sharing takeout Chinese food and processing the surreal experience of seeing our private family trauma become public validation. I spent so many years wondering if I made the right choice in looking for you, Jennifer said, holding my hand as we watched Roberto's perp walk on the evening news. Seeing what they put you through, what they stole in your name, I know that finding you was exactly what needed to happen. David called me on day 3 with updates that were both satisfying and shocking. The FBI had discovered additional crimes during their search of Roberto's construction business and my parents' home. They were running multiple fraudulent schemes, he explained. The adoption fraud was just the beginning. We found evidence of tax evasion, insurance fraud, and what looks like a side business helping other families falsify disability claims for illegal benefits. The scope of their criminal enterprise was staggering. Roberto had been using his construction business as a front for laundering stolen benefit money, while Carmen coordinated with corrupt medical professionals to create false disability diagnoses for other families willing to pay for the service. We estimate they stole over $500,000 from various government programs and helped other families steal millions more, David continued. This is going to be one of the largest adoption and disability fraud cases our office has ever prosecuted. Maria called with updates on the civil lawsuit front. The government wants to make an example of this case, she said. They are seeking full restitution plus triple damages, which means Roberto and Carmen could owe over $2 million even before we factor in our civil suit for identity theft and emotional damage. The house, the cars, the business, everything was being seized to pay restitution to the programs they had defrauded. Sophia would lose her apartment, her car, and the trust fund that Roberto had established for her using stolen money. But the personal aftermath was even more devastating than the financial collapse. Carmen called me from jail on day 4, using her one permitted phone call to beg for forgiveness and help with bail money. "Isabella, please listen to me," she sobbed into the phone. "I know we made mistakes, but we did love you. We gave you a good home, a good education, opportunities you never would have had otherwise. You gave me trauma and lies," I replied coldly. "You stole money in my name and used it to fund Sophia's lifestyle while making me feel guilty for every dollar I earned. That is not love, Carmen. That is exploitation. But we are still family," she pleaded. "Blood or not, we raised you. That has to count for something." "It does count for something," I agreed. "It counts as evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy and child abuse." "Goodbye, Carmen." I hung up and blocked their number from the jail phone system. The extended family reaction was swift and decisive. Aunt Carmen, who had provided crucial evidence, became the family pariah for betraying Roberto and Carmen. Uncle David and most of the relatives who had witnessed the Thanksgiving assault now claimed they had always suspected something was wrong but were too afraid to speak up. Most satisfying was the reaction from the relatives who had watched Roberto hit me at Thanksgiving without intervening. Several of them reached out with pathetic apologies and attempts to maintain relationships, apparently hoping to distance themselves from the scandal. I ignored them all. If they could watch me get beaten for refusing to enable Sophia's lifestyle and do nothing, they were not people I wanted in my life anyway. Sophia's fall from grace was particularly dramatic. Her social media accounts, once filled with photos from expensive restaurants and weekend trips, became a steady stream of increasingly desperate posts about her financial situation. Her friends disappeared as soon as the news broke and her credit cards were canceled. The freelance photography business she had always claimed was about to take off never materialized, probably because it had never existed in the first place. She tried reaching out through mutual friends, former classmates, even my coworkers at the hospital. Everyone told her the same thing: I was done enabling her lifestyle, and they should not contact me on her behalf. 2 weeks after the arrests, Sophia showed up at my apartment building, looking haggard and desperate. The security guard called up to ask if I wanted to see her, and I told him to send her away. Through my window, I watched her stand on the sidewalk for over an hour, occasionally looking up at my building with a mixture of anger and desperation. When she finally left, she kicked a trash can so hard she nearly fell over. That night, Marcus called with the final piece of information I needed. "I found the original adoption paperwork," he said. "The legitimate documents from before Roberto and Carmen falsified everything. Your birth name was Isabella Walsh. Jennifer named you after her grandmother, a woman who immigrated from Ireland and built a successful business despite having nothing when she arrived in America. Isabella Walsh. A name that connected me to a legacy of strength and determination rather than fraud and exploitation. A name that represented genuine love rather than calculated manipulation." As I sat in my apartment that night, looking out at the Phoenix skyline and thinking about everything that had changed in just 2 weeks, I realized that I was no longer Isabella Martinez, the family scapegoat who never felt like she belonged. I was Isabella Walsh, the daughter of a woman who had spent 12 years saving money and searching for the child she had never wanted to lose. 6 months after the arrests, I stood in a federal courthouse watching Roberto and Carmen Martinez receive their sentences. Roberto got 18 years for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. Carmen received 15 years for her role in the systematic theft of disability benefits. Both would be required to pay full restitution plus penalties, ensuring they would emerge from prison completely broke. Sophia received 3 years probation and community service for her role as a knowing beneficiary of the fraud, but her real punishment was the complete collapse of the privileged lifestyle she had always taken for granted. She was working 2 minimum-wage jobs trying to afford a studio apartment in the worst part of town. As the judge read the sentences, I felt something I had never experienced before: complete vindication. Every time they had made me feel guilty for my success, every dollar they had demanded I give Sophia, every moment they had treated me like an ungrateful burden, had been projection and manipulation designed to hide their own criminal behavior. Jennifer sat beside me in the courtroom, her hand squeezing mine as we watched justice finally being served. Over the past months, we had built the mother-daughter relationship that Roberto and Carmen had stolen from us 28 years ago. "How do you feel?" she whispered as Roberto was led away in shackles. "Free," I replied honestly. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely free." The legal resolution was satisfying, but the personal transformation was even more profound. Working with Maria, I had legally changed my name back to Isabella Walsh and begun the process of reconnecting with Jennifer's extended family. I discovered grandparents who had never stopped hoping to meet me, cousins who welcomed me with genuine warmth, and a family history built on love rather than lies. Jennifer's savings account, which she had maintained for 12 years hoping to help the daughter she lost, became the down payment on a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood where we could build new memories together. Not as a way to replace the lost years, but as a foundation for the future we both deserved. My career at the hospital flourished as I channeled my experience with family trauma into specialized work with pediatric patients from difficult backgrounds. The skills I had developed dealing with manipulation and gaslighting made me uniquely qualified to recognize signs of abuse and advocate for vulnerable children. David offered me a position as a consultant with the FBI's Family Fraud Task Force, helping them identify and investigate adoption scams and benefit fraud cases. The work was emotionally challenging but deeply satisfying, knowing that I was helping prevent other families from experiencing what Jennifer and I had endured. The financial settlement from the civil lawsuit was substantial enough to secure my future and fund Jennifer's early retirement from social work. But more importantly, it validated every injustice I had suffered and every dollar Roberto and Carmen had demanded from me over the years. Carmen tried reaching out several times from prison, sending letters claiming she wanted to make amends and rebuild our relationship. I returned every letter unopened. Some bridges, once burned by betrayal and criminal exploitation, should never be rebuilt. Sophia's attempts at reconciliation were equally pathetic and equally unsuccessful. She seemed genuinely unable to understand that her comfortable lifestyle had been built on money stolen from programs designed to help disabled children. Even facing eviction and financial ruin, she continued to view herself as the victim of my vindictive pursuit of justice. The most unexpected gift of this entire experience was the chosen family I built from the allies who had helped me uncover the truth. David became like the protective older brother I had never had, checking in regularly and celebrating every milestone in my recovery from the trauma. Maria became a trusted friend and mentor, teaching me about legal advocacy and the power of holding criminals accountable for their actions. Even Aunt Carmen, despite being ostracized by the rest of the Martinez family for telling the truth, became an important part of my support system. Her courage in providing crucial evidence had made the entire case possible, and her genuine remorse for years of silent complicity set her apart from the relatives who chose willful ignorance. "I should have spoken up years ago," she said during one of our regular coffee meetings. "I let my fear of family drama override my responsibility to protect you from what I knew was wrong. I cannot change that, but I can make sure Miguel grows up knowing the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult." Miguel, now 9 years old, understood more about the situation than most adults gave him credit for. His innocent comment at Thanksgiving had been the catalyst that brought down a decades-long criminal conspiracy, and he took pride in being the one who told the truth when the grown-ups were too scared. A year after the sentencing, Jennifer and I established the Isabella Walsh Foundation, dedicated to helping families navigate legitimate adoption processes and providing support for children aging out of the foster care system. The foundation was funded partially by my settlement money and partially by donations from people who had followed our story in the media. Our first major project was creating a scholarship program for children from difficult backgrounds who wanted to pursue nursing degrees. Having seen how my medical training helped me recognize and document abuse, we wanted to empower other survivors to build careers helping vulnerable populations. The Foundation's mission statement, which Jennifer and I wrote together, captured everything we had learned from our experience. Every child deserves a family built on love rather than exploitation. Every person deserves the truth about their origins. And every crime against children, no matter how well hidden or cleverly justified, deserves to be exposed and punished. As I finish telling this story, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever felt like the scapegoat in your family? Have you experienced that gut feeling that something was not quite right with how you were treated compared to siblings? Trust those instincts, because families that operate on secrets and lies often target one person to carry the blame for everyone else's problems. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Hit that like button if you believe that blood family is not always real family, and that chosen family can be stronger than biological connections. Subscribe for more stories about justice, truth, and the courage it takes to stand up to people who have hurt you, even when those people share your name. Drop a comment and tell me about a time when you had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right. I read every single comment because your stories matter, and sharing them helps other people feel less alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey from exploitation to freedom. I hope my experience reminds you that you deserve relationships built on love and respect, not manipulation and lies. Sometimes the family you choose is the one that truly sees and values who you are. Remember, the truth might be painful at first, but it is always more healing than living a lie.